All right, so dominate the hidden job market of the future. Jobs you'll love, multiple offers, bidding wars, uncommon expert advice from a top headhunter who has recruited for Apple and Google. That's me, Ryan LaCour. I'm your host. Here's part one: a new mindset and a new paradigm. Step one: don't be fooled or discouraged by all the crappy advice. There is hope. Translation: we're going to discuss a new understanding of the job market and how to play the game. Let's quickly define the word paradigm just so we're all on the same page. The word paradigm can be defined as a set of techniques, rules, beliefs, and values held in common by a thought community. Now, let's briefly discuss the paradigm that exists when it comes to searching for jobs and the job market. What kind of advice can we typically find out there when we go looking to improve our careers? Here's a spoiler alert. Most of the advice you will find is unhelpful. It typically falls into one of a few categories: too obvious, stuff you've already heard before or should already know, and most of all, it generally just teaches you to play within the same boundaries as everyone else. So the bottom line is, the bad advice we receive and find on the internet and all of the traditional approaches associated with it tend to leave us with table scraps when it comes to securing career opportunities. So let's consider what some of this bad advice is. I'm sure a lot of it will look familiar to you. And what I did here is I just did a quick search on how to find a great job. And here's what I immediately uncovered. I'm not going to reveal necessarily the source of this information. And of course, I'm just going to paraphrase and distill the advice that I've dug up. So, common unhelpful advice number one. The first thing I see is advice to put together an interesting resume. Now, there's something I'm sure you didn't think of. Number two, ensure your resume isn't filled with common words and redundant phrasing. So I'm guessing this piece of advice is suggesting that you use stilted language and essentially fluff. Of course, I'm going to say this is horrible advice. Common language is exactly what you should be using. Applicants who try to sound smart and puff up what they're saying come off seeming ridiculous, and it's a huge LVT, which we're going to get into, and it stands for low value telegraph. Common unhelpful advice number three is to search career specific job sites, even ones that are unconventional. Now, this piece of advice is suggesting that job boards are going to be your main source for finding what jobs are out there and for the starting point in your job search. This advice is essentially telling you that a job board is where your job must be found. And I'm here to tell you that if you find your job on a job board, you are literally fighting for the jobs that nobody really wants. If a job makes it onto a job board, that is often the very first sign or the first indicator that it is actually an undesirable job. If there's a job advertisement for the job, that means that it requires spending on a marketing and advertising budget to get people to even act on that job. And furthermore, if you didn't know that a job board was somewhere to go and look for jobs and you actually needed advice to figure that out, then I'm not sure what planet you're from. Number four, make your irrelevant experience seem relevant. Again, this resource is advising you to do something which is essentially another LVT, low value telegraph. This individual who's putting this together is telling you to try to trick the hiring manager or talent acquisition officer into believing something that isn't true. If your experience is truly irrelevant in all senses of the word, it should not be involved in any part of the process. However, that's not just to say that you shouldn't look for relevant aspects of all parts of your experience in order to include it. But if you've done this and there is truly nothing relevant, then there's no reason to sugarcoat it. This is inauthentic and poor advice. Common unhelpful advice number five, dress well for the interview. So I'm not going to say much about this. I'm just going to say this is not helpful. Okay? You should know to dress well for the interview. You didn't need to go search on Google to figure that out, right? Common unhelpful advice number six is learn to read body language. This is what it said. This is what the resource I looked up said. It was right there on the first page of Google. And it's true that reading body language may help you in your pursuit for career advancement. But advice like this is akin to telling you to go learn to become an extrovert. It's really not helpful, in other words, given the situation that you may be in right now. Common unhelpful advice number seven, know how to give great answers to common job interview questions. Again, pretty obvious advice. But also, this piece of advice suggests that the main purpose of an interview is to show up, and have questions flung at you to see how well you can answer them. And I want to suggest that that is in fact not the main purpose of an interview. The main purpose of an interview should be more of a two-way street, and the playing field should be a little bit more equal, and it's up to you to level that playing field. So, taking advice such as this example right here essentially seeks to keep you at a disadvantage. Common unhelpful advice number 8, ask for a signing bonus. And I would say, maybe you should, but it's really not that simple. What you need is a step-by-step system for negotiating. Just asking for a signing bonus without the proper context or build-up will make you look like a crazy person. Common unhelpful advice number 9 is leave your current job without burning any bridges. And what I say to that is, thanks a lot. So what you're saying is don't be a jerk. Got it. So as you can see right here, we're getting advice that is fairly obvious and just not very helpful. Most of us already know that it's a good idea to show up on time, to dress professionally, to potentially send a thank you card, to have a strong handshake, etc. And we can get all of that advice out of the way in the first 10 seconds. So, without further ado, let's move on from the cliche stuff and get to some step-by-step advice that has more substance. The real way to get ahead is by thinking outside of the box and outside of the current paradigm or game that everyone is currently playing within. So by the end of this course, you're going to play the game in a completely different way. It's going to be the way of the top 2%. Because, wouldn't you know it, the top 2% are actually the ones that get the jobs that everybody wants. Moving right along to the next step.